In January 2026, Iran entered what may be its most serious political crisis in decades. A currency collapse triggered nationwide protests that spread beyond the usual urban centers into cities that had previously remained loyal to the Islamic Republic. The government responded with internet blackouts across 11 provinces, a measure reserved for moments when the state perceives existential risk. This is not the first time Iranians have taken to the streets, but the scale, geography, and underlying causes of this uprising suggest something structurally different is underway. How this started: the currency collapse. The Iranian rial lost approximately 30% of its value within days in early January. Currency crises are not new to Iran, but the speed and severity of this collapse caught both the government and the population off guard. For ordinary Iranians, this was not an abstract economic indicator. It meant the price of bread, fuel, and medicine spiked overnight. Savings evaporated. Salaries became worthless before they were spent. The collapse affected everyone, but it hit hardest those who had no foreign currency reserves and no means to hedge against inflation: Iran's working and lower middle classes. What made this moment politically dangerous was not just the economic pain, but the breakdown of an implicit social contract. For years, many Iranians tolerated repression and international isolation in exchange for basic economic stability. When that stability vanished, so did a critical pillar of regime legitimacy. The 2022 protests were triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini and centered on women's rights, social freedoms, and state repression. They were culturally driven, concentrated in Tehran and other liberal-leaning cities, and primarily led by young, educated urbanites. The 2026 uprising is economically driven. It began with anger over currency collapse and inflation, grievances that transcend ideology. Critically, protests spread into traditionally conservative cities like Mashhad, a religious heartland that has historically supported the regime. When economically desperate citizens in these areas join protests, it signals a collapse in the government's base of support. This uprising also draws broader demographic participation. It's not just students and activists. It includes shopkeepers, workers, retirees, and families struggling to afford basic goods. Economic crises are harder to dismiss as foreign interference or the work of agitators when entire communities are affected. One defining feature of this movement is its lack of centralized leadership. There is no figurehead, no formal opposition structure, no political party coordinating from exile. This is largely a Gen Z-led phenomenon, organized through encrypted apps and decentralized networks. Despite internet blackouts, protesters have adapted. They use VPNs, mesh networks, and offline coordination tactics developed during previous crackdowns. Videos and information still leak out, maintaining international attention even under digital siege. For the regime, this decentralization is both a vulnerability and a complication. There is no leader to arrest, no organization to ban, no negotiating partner to co-opt. Repression becomes a game of whack-a-mole against a dispersed adaptive network. The government's response has followed a familiar pattern: deploying security forces and imposing blackouts. But suppression during an economic crisis carries unique risks. Escalating violence can destabilize the situation further, potentially fracturing the security apparatus itself. Soldiers and police are also affected by inflation. Their loyalty is not guaranteed when their families are struggling. At the same time, inaction invites more protests. The regime faces a calculation: crack down hard and risk accelerating collapse, or show restraint and risk appearing weak. Internet blackouts are a blunt tool. They limit protesters' ability to organize, but they also cripple commerce, banking, and communication networks that the economy depends on. Prolonged blackouts deepen the economic crisis they were meant to contain. Even if the Islamic Republic were to collapse, what comes next is deeply uncertain. There is no unified opposition, no government in exile with legitimacy, no clear successor structure. Decades of repression have prevented the formation of alternative institutions. History shows that regime collapse does not automatically lead to stability or democracy. It can produce fragmentation, civil conflict, or the rise of new authoritarian structures. Internally, Iran's ethnic and political divisions could deepen. Regionally, neighbors and rival powers would almost certainly intervene, further complicating any transition. What makes January 2026 different is not just the protests themselves, but the economic and social conditions beneath them. Iran is facing a structural test, not just of the regime's durability, but of whether the state can maintain control when the basic economic foundations of governance have eroded. Whether this becomes a turning point or another cycle of repression and recovery remains uncertain. What is clear is that the dynamics driving this moment are fundamentally different from past uprisings, and that difference matters.